So I was sitting here and I was reminded of sitting at home on Inauguration Day in 2017, and I was watching CNN. This was before I think the term fake news had been coined, though we knew there was plenty of fake news. And I was watching, I was flipping back and forth between channels, but it was CNN that caught my attention. And during the president's inaugural address, or what I've sometimes started to call his first inaugural address, he uttered the words "America First," and everyone on CNN, including their two quote-unquote conservative hosts, got the vapors. I can't believe he said that. He's invoking Charles Lindbergh right here in his first inaugural address. Can you believe it? And I thought, this is the problem. People don't seem to understand the idea of a rooted nationalism. And the question, when I was doing media all through 2016, and I always get this question about America First, I would say, well, what do you expect a candidate for president of the United States to say? America Second? Which always, I mean, this is like the most obvious comeback, right? And nobody ever had an answer for me. I would always get that sort of deer in the headlights stare. And so we focused all this time, and I'm thankful that we're able to come here to a place called National Conservatism, where people talk unabashedly, unashamedly about nationalism, about the virtues of the nation state as a means of protecting ordered liberty and of creating sustainable, peaceful, prosperous societies. But I want to sort of flip the script a little bit and think about globalism, which is in a sense the mirror image or the competitor for nationalism. And so I want to start by giving you an example rather than a definition of globalism. Right? In Hollywood, they say show, don't tell, right? I can't show, but I'm going to tell and show. I hope it works. So Emmanuel Todd, the glasses are here. Emmanuel Todd is a French sociologist in his 70s now. He is an avowed man of the left. And he made what I think is one of the most incisive and most French observations about our current political moment, on both sides of the Atlantic, which is sometimes called a populist moment, sometimes a nationalist moment, sometimes both. Here we, I guess, call it a national conservative moment, but it encapsulates the same moment. It encapsulates the same set of ideas to a large extent. And here's what Todd said. He said the opposition between what are called populist movements and movements of so-called elites has long been complicated by a major paradox. The elites express, in elegant and apparently moderate terms, absurd ideas that are characterized in reality by extreme violence. The discourse of globalization is nothing but shit in a silk stocking. Among its propagandists, we find well-bred persons who boast of every imaginable credential, but who say awful things and condemn a significant part of the population to social exclusion. In the opposing camp, we find improbable personalities such as Trump, who certainly utter obscenities that are in fact much more reasonable and moderate in their economic, social, and demographic implications. Frenchman, no less. But why did he use the term shit in a silk stocking? Some of you may recognize the phrase. It's how Napoleon referred to his foreign minister, Talleyrand, and it is a remarkably useful and accurate allusion today when we think about about our global elite. Some people in this room have called the cathedral. Talleyrand was the richest man in France and her chief diplomat, which makes him sound suspiciously like the modern globalist oligarch that we sometimes call Davos man. Talleyrand is notorious because he took bribes from France's enemies while he was negotiating treaties on behalf of Bonaparte. Such treacheries still happen. See, for example, Samir Jain. He was the head of cybersecurity at the National Security Council under the Obama administration. This means that he was working in the West Wing of the White House for the president. It makes him one of the top, if not the top, American official in charge of cybersecurity. So how does Samir Jain earn his daily bread today? This man now works for the Chinese, having taken a position advising Huawei on how to, quote, deal with, or more likely evade, the very security standards that he helped to create. This is wrong. But it is also typical of the global elite who see themselves not as Americans, but as free agents, as global citizens seeking their own narrow parochial interests and who are happy to line their pockets regardless of what it does to their country. The spirit of Talleyrand is alive and well. We have plenty of our own shit in a silk stocking. I'll give you another example. Google. As Peter Thiel noted the other night, Google refuses to work with the American military, but engages in what he called a seemingly treasonous collaboration with the Chinese military. Why? Because they don't think that they are American, and they don't feel that they owe any homage or fealty to the American people or to the American nation. So, with that as an introduction of what globalism is and what it does, let me put forth a few propositions. Number one, globalism is an advanced and deviant form of liberalism. Number two, there is a comprehensive ideology that supports what we often refer to as globalism. Three, the globalist ideology is both utopian and dehumanizing. Four, the city-state and the nation-state are better suited to nurturing and sustaining ordered liberty and the good life. Why do I say the city-state? Why do I include that? Because we have successful city-states operating in the world today. See Singapore. There are others. Hong Kong is a pretty good example, but Singapore maybe is the best. So we will include them too. 5, globalism is an impatient, messianic ideology that engages in moral imperialism and is dependent upon violence. Witness our own country's optional wars, but witness also the way social and economic punishments are imposed upon those who question the ideology behind globalism. They are shamed, they are deplatformed, they are ostracized, and they are often made unemployable. Those who question the secular religion are shown no mercy. And that's the best way to understand this deviant form of political ideology that we call globalism, as a secular religion that self-consciously seeks to replace revealed religion. James Damone of Google is a well-known example of the shaming, the deplatforming, the dehumanizing, and the rendering unemployable. Number 6. Globalism is a materialist, man-centered ideology that is overtly hostile to biblical religion and the family, which both represent competing power centers and which must therefore be degraded or destroyed. So having given you those propositions, let me quote the president from the Warsaw speech in 2017. He said, and I reiterate, the fundamental question of our time is whether the West has the will to survive. Do we have the confidence in our values to defend them at any cost? Do we have enough respect for our citizens to protect our borders? Do we have the desire and the courage to preserve our civilization in the face of those who would subvert and destroy it? Those are all good questions, and the answer, I think, is very much up in the air. But they're worth fighting for. Western civilization itself is at a crossroads across the globe. Whether that civilization be manifested in the Western Hemisphere or the East, in the North or in the South, all of us share a rich heritage that is under attack. This time by a pernicious idea that is as old as human history. It is the idea with which the serpent tempted Eve. It is the idea that man can be his own God. The manifestation of the idea in a political ideology and a related political movement have brought us to this unique moment. We now have a president who is a nationalist and who unapologetically believes in our people. We must now, as a people, reject the idea that nations and people should surrender their sovereignty to supranational and transnational organizations, to powerful but unaccountable bureaucrats like those governing the EU from Brussels, to corporations loyal to themselves but not to their countries or their fellow citizens, see above, Google, and certainly not to the so-called NGOs, like the misleadingly named Open Society Foundation and other foundations associated with people like eBay founder Pierre Omidyar and Tom Steyer. They have other goals. They are powers unto themselves that seek political control, albeit indirectly and often behind the scenes. They seek to exert an unjust and unfair influence by strategic targeting of social and political pressure points. They seek to shut down conservatives and traditionalists, and they are well-financed, as left-wing causes always seem to be. But let me digress for one moment. That seems sort of ominous. There's all this money on the other side. There's all these institutions. Basically every Fortune 500, every Fortune 1000 company. And yet we still have a president here who won. In the United States, Trump was outspent 2-1. He won. In Brazil, President Bolsonaro spent very little on his successful campaign, less than a mayor would spend in the United States. He won too. And Deputy Prime Minister Matteo Salvini and his Lega Party, I am told, spent less than $1 million in last year's election, and that party is now the largest in Italy. Those examples tell us something. They speak volumes about the strength of powerful ideas when they are married with energetic and charismatic candidates. The result of the intersection of the globalist ideology and the institutions that support it and spread it is that the Western world is currently undergoing a rolling political earthquake. As free nations reassert their role against the encroachments and usurpations of a powerful front of unaccountable organizations that gained significant power over the past few generations, it's unclear at this point who or what wins. The organizations arrayed against us, against the nation-state, include these multi-state, multilateral organizations like the EU, the UN, the WTO, but they also include corporations and the academy and the media. Let me jump ahead, since I know I'm running out of time, and I want to get to a place where we talk seriously about what it is that can be done, because that really is what this is about. What are the results of globalism? In the United States, over the past 50 years, household incomes have been basically stagnant and have remained that stable mostly because more households have two wage earners now than ever before. In other words, it takes two incomes to maintain a middle-class home today where it once took only one. Meanwhile, even this president, the one who gave the Warsaw speech, which clarified the big issues so well, is missing a crucial piece. In his State of the Union, Trump said this year, in just January, he said, quote, "All Americans can be proud that we have more women in the workforce than ever before." That was one of the few lines that drew bipartisan applause in the chamber. But why? Are we so sure that that's a good thing? The clear premise is that work outside the home is more valuable, more honorable, and more fulfilling than work inside the home. That is simply not so. But it is a destructive delusion under which we have labored for a very long time, and we are paying the price. Is any of this to say that women can't or shouldn't work outside the home? Of course not. That's silly. The book of Proverbs says that an excellent wife will find a field and buy it, and with the fruit of her hands she plants a vineyard. And later, that she perceives that her merchandise is profitable. She's wise in commerce. But it also makes clear that, like her husband, her focus is on her family, and that's what's missing. We're sold a myth by global corporations that want cheap labor and consumers that women getting into the workforce, it's going to be great. It's going to be just like Sheryl Sandberg if only you'll just lean in. The reality is working in a retail store or an office cubicle that shows that what a majority of women really want, an office cubicle, paying for gas and work clothes and daycare and barely coming out ahead. Yet there's a large body of research that shows that what a majority of women really want is to raise their children and then later, at some point, return to the workforce outside the home. But that's not possible now. That's what Elizabeth Warren rightly called the two-income trap. This is the globalist program, because globalism, again, wants consumers and cheap labor. And the social costs of this are readily apparent, and they're painful. More divorces, more consumer debt, more children raising themselves, and a fertility rate that is unsustainable. In Portugal, 1.24. In Spain, 1.39. Italy, 1.49. The US, 1.72. But we shouldn't feel too good about it. The replacement rate is 2.1. So what do? Let me just propose three big things. One, we must elevate and strengthen the basic institutions of human life. These giving meaning and those that give meaning and promote happiness. They are, number one, the family. Sustainable, happy societies rely not on the individual homo economicus, but on the family. Number two, or I should say B, religion. The church and the synagogue, along with the family, are the foundation of society, and they should be supported by government. C, friendship. This means less intermediated action through a screen and more in real life relationships. Number two, Many of the post-war globalist institutions that were created by the United States have become destructive and actually undermine the peace and prosperity of the American nation and degrade human life here and abroad. They should be shuttered. I'll start with two, the UN and the EU, which I call patient zero of the globalist virus. If we want to get hold of the Prime Minister of Slovenia, we do not have to go to Manhattan. We can just call him or email him. And number three, and this one's a freebie for Republican candidates, a policy goal for conservatives that will win non-traditional GOP voters: break the two-income trap. Propose a bold agenda, the family deal, that will reorder the American economy in a way that A, allows a family of 5 or 6 to be solidly middle class on a single income, and 2, that emphasizes growth through innovation rather than financialization. So there's the problem, and there are my solutions. Get to work.